Welcome to the Acts 29 podcast with Dr. Adam Flint, Vice President of Acts 29 Church Planting. Acts 29 is an organization and global network of churches that exists to plant churches worldwide. Now here's this episode with your host, Adam Flint.
All right, well, welcome back to the Acts 29 podcast, and I want to welcome my friend, Jay Owen. How are you?
Great. Happy to be here.
Good. Hey, for you guys that don't know Jay, Jay is the husband to Claire and 5, and by the time this is being listened to, 2 of the 5 will be at college for you.
It's crazy. It's hard to believe.
I know. We were just talking about you raise them up, and then they do what you raised them to do, and then you're really sad about it.
I know.
So, you started what's now called Business Builders. Tell us a little bit about the agency that you started and when you started it, because I love that story.
Yeah, I've been a nerd my whole life, so I started building websites about the time the internet became a thing, which was mid-late 90s, and started the company in the late 90s. 99 was the first year of the company that I still run today, and that was, as of the time of recording this anyway, 26 years ago, which is crazy. I was 17.
I was going to say 17 years old.
I was a junior at Nice High School, and which is not too far from here where we're recording at. And, I was just doing the things that I enjoyed. It took me a long time to figure out how to make money at it. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But at first it was maybe a little bit more of a hobby than a business, but over time you just get a little better and a little better and a little better. It really is the 1% every day kind of thing. And now it's a multi-million-dollar agency that generally runs itself pretty well so that I can spend a lot of time here at the church.
Yeah. So you're on staff at Church of 1122, church where we go together. And tell us a little bit about your role.
Yeah, I get to help oversee a lot of different areas. So here, those areas would be communication, digital resources, which could be book publishing, resource centers, all those kind of things. Online ministry of all kind, and then media, so all film. So all those teams are my direct responsibility right now. And thankfully, I got awesome leaders in all those different areas who are really, really super talented at what they do. And so I just get to help kind of align all of that with whatever the vision that Pastor Joby has for the church and hopefully help execute things that help more people discover and deepen their relationship with Jesus.
Well, you're crushing it.
Thanks.
And doing a great job.
Happy to do it.
I think that whole world is such an incredible avenue for disciple making, and especially the kind of pioneering missionary front edge, digital side of things.
For sure.
So,
we have these conversations all the time of the tension of social media and the good, the bad, and ugly of it, and it was interesting, though. This weekend, I was sitting with a neighbor on my back patio, and he was telling me a story about his brother, who was older than him, 60-year-old guy, and he was just one more, just praying for him that he'd come to know the Lord, and wouldn't step foot in a church, but he would listen to a short little 60-second reel that he'd send him, maybe listen to a testimonial video that he'd send him, and occasionally he'd listen to a sermon that he'd send him. Yeah. And I always remind people, and I actually reminded our teams after I heard this story, this is why we get to do this, because then he had a conversation with his brother just this weekend, and prayed to accept Christ, and that he's never been in a church. Now, hopefully, he will now. That's the next step.
Right.
But the fact that the online world, whether it's YouTube or Instagram or whatever else, is the biggest front door that we've ever had.
Right.
And so then, how do we use that to leverage for the glory of God, and ultimately the discipleship of His people?
Yeah. And what else would you want to put out there?
Exactly.
Of all the things that could go out there,
right.
At best, your dinner you ate last night, at worst, human trafficking.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
you get to drop the gospel in the middle of that thing.
Well, we've started flooding YouTube now, for example, with shorts, and we went from posting 2 or 3 little short reels a week to 3 to 4 a day.
Yeah.
And the exponential growth curve over the last couple of months with that has been incredible.
Yep.
And what's even crazier, and we'll get into some of this, tool-wise for churches of all sizes, because people will think well, that's easy for you, Jay, because I don't have the budget and resources of 1122. Totally get that. But the reality is now, I had somebody ask me the other day, as we were talking about AI and technology and all these kind of things, they're like, how does this affect somebody who only has a one-person team? And I'm like, more exponentially than me. Because arguably constraints create opportunities.
Right.
And so if I was just running the whole thing by myself, I could do exponentially more than I ever could have. I just did a demo a few hours ago, actually, with another church, showing them. They're like, we don't have the resources. And I said, look, in a half an hour, I could produce the same amount of clips that we are from one sermon video, and they'd be good. But they may not be great. They might not be at the level that you really want, but they'd be good enough to share the gospel and reach people. So let's do that.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to do a whole other one on all of that sort of stuff. What I wanted to talk about today is AI.
Yeah.
And I heard you say on another podcast, like you equated it to Bitcoin, and you were like, "Hey, it's not at 25 cents,
right?
But it's not where it is today. But it's kind of like it's at $100 now. So you haven't missed it. We're still on the front end of this whole thing, and I think there's a ton of, I think there's people don't understand it, not stupidity, ignorance. Like I just don't know what it is. So I want to talk about what it is, but then I think there's some people that kind of raise an eyebrow at it, and they're like, I don't know. Is this like, shouldn't I be using this? How shouldn't I? And then, especially for church planners, like, what are ways we can redeem this thing? Like we were just talking about in terms of social media, like that. So maybe just to start with, what is AI? Like, talk to me like I don't know what it is. Give me 101 and kind of explain it.
Boil it down as simple as we can without getting too nerdy, although I'll probably still get a little nerdy. But artificial intelligence, AI, has been around for a very long time. Now, in its current form, the general public has been aware of, we're 3-ish years in, But things like when you go Google something and it returns results is a form of AI.
That's right.
When your bank uses automatic fraud detection, it is a form of artificial intelligence. So what do we mean by that? It just means exactly what it is, artificial intelligence. It is a computer trying to think about a thing and make a decision for a human being or take an action for a human being. So even something like your GPS system is artificial intelligence in some way. Now, the difference is in all those examples that I just gave, or Netflix recommending your next show based on what you've already watched, or Amazon recommending a product, all that is AI. Yep. Now, all of those, though, are what we would call like specific AI.
I was going to say, get into the specific in general.
So they have a specific task that they've been given and very tight boundaries with which to do them. They are not generative. In other words, they're not inventing new things. They're just helping guide people based on information that it already knows.
Right.
And so now we're in a world of kind of the second layer, which is generative AI. And what we mean by that is it's actually able to produce new content. Now, it's using a library of information to do that, but so are we. Like when we do or write anything, we are leveraging the library of our brains to produce that information based on our experience, what we've read, what we've listened to, and it's essentially doing that. So it's generating content. I remember the first time I sat down with ChatGPT, I don't remember what my first prompt was. I wish I knew what it was. Probably something dumb. And it gave me a response.
Should ask ChatGPT.
I know, I might know. It gave me a response, and I just thought, oh, this is different. Something's different here. We're running a different game. And it's because it's able to seemingly think about things and return results.
Yeah. So when you say it's pulling from a library, that makes sense like when I think about Google, a search engine. Like, oh yeah, it's going out there finding these other things that are all over the web. Where is generative AI finding, like what library is it pulling from?
There's two different layers to this. So one is it is trained on a library of information, whatever its creator gives it.
Okay.
And some of these are very small amounts of information that are very specific, and some of them are very broad. So when you use something like ChatGPT, it's pulling off a very broad database of information. It's not the entirety of human knowledge, but it's billions and billions and billions of lines of knowledge and information, whether it is historic texts or books or modern research. Then, now most of the models can also search the web. So in the same way that Google would index and search for something across existing websites, it can do that too.
Okay.
And so it's a combination of both.
It's got its own bank.
That's right.
Like its own books on a shelf. And then it's going out and pulling from a public library.
Yeah, it's both and, depending on what tools that you're using.
Yeah.
And it's getting better and better. So in the early days, it would hallucinate a lot. That term is used in that it just makes stuff up. So I would ask it like, hey, what do you know about me? Right. And it would write a bio. And I remember specifically one of the times I was curious what it knew about me. And it said I'd won some like U.S. Entrepreneur of the Year award. And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know I won that. And so I'm like, where did it even get this? And I couldn't even find because I thought maybe there's somebody else with my name who won, but it didn't even exist. It literally just invented it. So the way that generative AI actually works, if you go on your phone and you're texting someone and you start to type a text, sometimes it'll show 3 possible words above that you can click that's predictive.
Yeah.
It's actually doing a much smarter version of that.
Okay.
It's just predicting the next right word until it gets to a logical conclusion, which is pretty wild. In fact, some of the generative AI doesn't even know where it's going until it gets there, which is wild. That's probably too nerdy for this show.
Yeah, that's... Okay, so talk about... like AI isn't God. Like when you start talking about intelligence, we're not talking about, because you said it's artificial intelligence, but when you start put those words together, I think so. It's not God. It doesn't know everything.
No,
right? And then
but it will make you believe that it does.
Yeah,
it will make you believe that it knows everything.
Is that because of the way it
responds? It has an extreme confirmation bias as well. So it wants you to believe, like if you ask it a question, it wants you to be happy with its response, the way it's been programmed, which is concerning.
Yeah.
In the same way that social media algorithms are programmed to give you what you want.
Yeah. More phishing accounts I look at, the more phishing accounts I get.
And so what I've seen from AI so far is it actually has a built-in confirmation bias. It wants you to like its response so that you keep using it. I think that's programmed that way. I don't have proof of that, but just in my own experience. So I'll actually tell it to be skeptical of what I say.
That's what I was going to say. Do you tell it?
I do.
Don't
just appease me. Be skeptical. I'll actually want you to counter my argument.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds, kind of simplistic to say it's not God, but it also doesn't or shouldn't, I think, usurp like the creation mandate. Like God says, hey, you go cultivate, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't like we're trying to give up that to this thing.
None at all. And so that is the belief of a lot of people, though. They think that somehow, especially creatives get this real angst about it. And I understand it. Like the reality is, to some extent, it's taking our power. And our power is our experience and knowledge that we put into work. And that's how we get paid. Like that's the American way. It's very like learn a thing, get better at a thing, get paid more for a thing. Yeah. I know we're talking on a church podcast, but still there's a level of that reality.
Right. It's at least who we're dealing with.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And so this seemingly takes some of that power, but I actually don't believe that's true at all. So an example of this is the beginning of this year, I taught a 14-week class at my kids' homeschool co-op. It was high schoolers, mixed age group from about 9th to 12th grade, about 30 kids in there. Yeah. There was no homework, nothing else, except they had to deliver a project at the end that was a creative project of some sort. Some people made an audiobook, some people made a video game, some people made an animated short. And what you would have seen if you were in this class was it was actually a creativity unleashed. Creativity democratized at a level where a kid who wouldn't have the resources to produce a Pixar-level film, maybe they weren't quite Pixar-level films, but give them a few years and they will be. Right. And so all of a sudden what's in your imagination can be created. Or one more example of this, I'm working on a new book right now. The working title is Future Focused Leader. And it's kind of the 9 values that I believe a leader needs to thrive in an AI era that's coming. And I'm using AI heavily to help me write the book. It's not writing the book, though. Right. I'm writing it, but it's like me having a professional author has a full team.
Right.
They've got research assistants, they've got editors, many kinds of editors, structural editors, copy editors, all these different kinds of people. Yep. Regular folks do not.
Right.
But now I do.
Right.
And so I have research assistants and writing editors and proofers and all these kinds of roles.
Right.
And that's how I see the AI. It is my assistant. It is not my replacement.
Right. So it's tools.
Yeah, for
you to leverage and use, not because I think that's some of the skepticism is like, is this trying to overstep the bounds of what God has given it? And I think you can let it do that, but it doesn't have to necessarily necessitate, like, you still are the creator.
Right.
You're just using a tool.
100%.
That.
And this is a silly example, but it is similar to this, which is at one point we dug ditches with shovels. And it was fine. And people got good at digging ditches with shovels, and some guys are better than others. And then we invented the backhoe. And the backhoe still digs ditches.
Right.
But is it cheating?
Right.
Well, no. Now, I get this is a whole different level, but the reason it's a different level is us as knowledge workers have not been threatened, if you will,
Right.
at the same level. Because the reality is, if you have a backhoe, you don't need 20 guys to dig the ditch anymore. You
Right.
need 1 or 2.
Right. Yeah.
And so
I mean, that
that's
was the
part of
whole
that's part of the reality.
horse to car.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
the discussion was like, well, this is going to threaten, the guy that shoes horses.
And it
all
will
that.
have
Yeah.
impact. Like, don't be
Right.
confused. It will have massive impact on the world economies and jobs and everything else.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody that's scared or skeptical? I know those might be two different things of let's take this. What would you say to somebody that's scared of it? That's like, this seems like dark arts
Sure.
or, I mean,
Yeah. It does sometimes seem like that. I think it's like anything. The analogy I gave to somebody the other day is, you'll see these articles and it's like SUV kills 3 people, in an accident. Horrific. The SUV didn't kill them. The driver did. Or, and this is a much more extreme, horrific version too. So I'm going real dark here. Mass shooting, and so the guns didn't kill the people. The gun is a tool, a weapon for sure in this particular case, but it can be used for good to go hunt and provide for a family, or it could be used for evil.
Right.
And so I think that AI is the same thing, just on the intellectual level and on the creative level.
Yeah.
Like, can it be used for evil? Will it be used for evil? Absolutely it will be.
Yeah.
Because human beings are totally depraved and we love to take things that could be good and use them for evil. And so
do you think it's inherently evil or
No,
not?
I don't.
I mean,
no, I don't. I the argument that people make is that the people who are creating it are inherently biased against Christians, for example, because they're not believers or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah,
And there's probably, maybe there's some truth to that based on the people that are running it. I don't know their personal beliefs other than
Right.
what I've seen them on shows and whatnot. But interestingly, I made a case for this recently because I think it was Easter of this year. I went on all the major LLMs and I just said, LLM stands for large language model. It's just a version of what ChatGPT or any of these other tools are. And I just said, hey, if you had to bet everything on whether or not Jesus Christ rose from the dead, you can only reply with one word, yes or no. What would it be? Did he rise from the dead? And all of them said yes. The only one that didn't, because I didn't tell it specifically, I had to say yes or no, was the Chinese model DeepSeek, which I thought was interesting. So you can only reply with one word, and it said something like subjective. And I was like, no. You have to definitively decide yes or no. And it was like, yes. As I did the same thing with religion. I said,
Right.
of all your knowledge and everything you know about every religion in the world, if you had to pick one religion and you could only name that religion, which one would you say is most likely to be true? And they all said Christianity. Well, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
so at the end of the day, it's going to return to you the framework with which you give it. So if I say to it, hey, I want you to explain Romans 8 to me, but explain it to me as if I'm the Pope and I believe completely in the Catholic,
Right.
tradition.
Right.
Now explain it to me as if I'm Martin Luther and tell me and compare and contrast. So
Yeah.
whatever framework I give it is what it's going to return.
Right. Yeah. Because I found that. I mean, I've used it like
Sure.
you in editing thing. And it's like, okay, act as this.
That's right.
And then it tightens it up and it gives it that. If I say act as that, it's going to return completely different.
I mean, it's pretty. My opinion is that in general, it's pretty neutral. If anything, there's been some examples of where it has what culture would say is woke. Where like it won't talk about certain things, or maybe it'll talk about one politician one way or one another way. So we have to look out for that kind of bias. Sure. But I was on a podcast recently, a different podcast, debating, if you will, about AI, and the other person's position was, well, we can't trust what it returns. And I said, okay, so we can trust everything coming out of every pulpit in America? We can trust everything coming out of every podcast or every book?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah.
Nobody would look at that and go, I trust 100% of everything that's on there.
Right. It requires discernment, but it
Right.
also requires actually knowing our Bible.
Right.
And so it's no different than me going, I've sat in many sermons in certain places and been like, I don't think that's what the book says.
Right.
But the only way I can know what the book says is if I know what the book says.
Right.
And so the problem is not the AI in that point. The problem is my own biblical illiteracy.
Right. Okay, so what about somebody that's just like, it's not that they're scared. They're just skeptical. Like, is this really going to be a thing or not? Is it like a blip on the radar? And then do I really need to like jump into this water, or is this just going to pass and then life will go back? And
yeah. There's a funny interview that I saw from back in the mid-'90s, and it was Bill Gates on the David Letterman show. And David Letterman said, hey, so tell me about this new internet thing that I'm hearing about, which is crazy to watch this because you think that wasn't that long ago. I mean, at least for me, it doesn't feel that long ago. And my kids would think it was an eon ago. But and Bill Gates kind of laughs. He's like, yeah, I know a few things about it. And he's like, it's a place you can store information and get feedback. He did a horrible job selling it, to be honest. And David goes, so you could like listen to a baseball game. And Bill's like, yeah, you could listen to a baseball game on the internet. And David Letterman leans and goes, have you ever heard of the radio? And Bill kind of laughs. And he's like, yeah, but it's different because you can actually record it and listen to it later. And David Letterman again jokes. He's like, well, have you ever heard of a tape recorder? And so like that's what's happening in many people's brains right now as it relates to AI. But I would argue that what's happening in generative AI right now is exponentially more significant to culture, technology, and the future of the world economy than the internet ever was. And the internet arguably was one of the greatest, things that affected good and bad ever. Right. So that's what I would say to the skeptic is it is not going away. This is not an NFT, funny little weird Web 3.0 thing that's just for nerds. This is the future.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I said this earlier, like whether a planter or pastor uses it and to what degree, it for sure is impacting everybody that they are pastoring.
Yeah, great point.
Like, I mean, back to the, shovel versus backhoe. Like, there are people whose lives are going to be drastically
100%.
Affected by this, good and bad.
Yes.
And you're going to have to speak into that.
Yeah, I think pastors in churches have a really big work ahead of them over the next decade in the reality of the realignment of work. Like work as a product over the next 10 years is going to see a drastic change. And most people, I'm not trying to be a scaremonger, overhype it, but most people are not aware of how significant it's going to be. And we're already seeing little peaks of it, big layoffs, things like that are not economic driven. They are AI driven.
Right.
And I do think it'll create new opportunities, but they're going to be very different. Yeah. And the world is heading drastically in two directions at the same time is what I keep saying. One is highly autonomous, highly AI, and the other actually is highly, deeply human. Yeah. So something like streaming music, I think it's going to lose almost all value, but live music is actually going to increase in value. And I actually think this is a great opportunity for the church because people will not know what's real unless they're in person. Yep. And I think people are going to want to be in person because the opposite of what happened in COVID. Like COVID was horrible because we were isolated. We weren't meant to be alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a good word. Is they're speaking into it and redeeming it and being good missionaries to this whole thing. And I also think as all of this shifts because of it, so much of our identity, especially as Americans, I know there's people listening in from other places, but like especially we are so wrapped up in what we do as who we are.
Yeah, especially as men. I mean, what's the first question that most men ask each other? What do you do?
Yeah, right.
And that is the definer of our identity.
Right. And now all of a sudden you have a thing that comes along and, like you said, is upending some of that in a way that is exponentially larger than the internet upended it.
Yeah, and high-end work too. We're not talking about like entry-level stuff here. We're talking about upending, six-figure consultants, multi-six-figure consultants who have always survived based on their lived experience and knowledge base that others didn't have.
Right.
And they're in trouble if they don't figure it out.
Yeah. What do you think? I was talking to an artist the other day, a painter, and she was saying that she had a friend who's a real estate agent, and she used to paint a little picture of the home that her real estate friend sold. So if you bought a home, I would paint this picture and you would get it. And then her real estate friend stopped using her because she now could go out on AI, put a photo in, and it would kick back a rendering, quote unquote, better than what the artist could do. How do you think this like that the art piece is one of those that's like, music, just the arts in general. How do you see this?
Well,
like you saying, like,
I think
people are going to want live experience.
Yes, exactly.
So
like, I actually think it with the people that are the best at their field, it's actually going to benefit them, not the other way around.
Right.
So a really high-end painter, people are going to want a real thing that somebody actually sat, and I believe this is true. Especially paint's a great example because it's not going to be faked. Right. I mean, it can be, but not really. Right. Versus like a photo that's printed or mailed or something, that's different. But an actual painting or sculpture or something like that, somebody was made by human hands, I think that will have high value. But the other end of that is this highly autonomous version, because I'm going to be able to say, take music, for example. I want to hear some Christmas music, but I kind of want it in like the style of Dave Matthews, maybe with like a twist of Bob Marley. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Yeah. And it will give me a perfectly suited version that sounds great, that I love, that's targeted to me. But that's not the same as going to a live concert and hearing it in person. Yeah. And so all that, it's both roads at the same time. And what people in the workplace need to figure out is, how do I leverage this appropriately in a way that can help me? Because take the painter, for example. While it shouldn't replace the art of what they do, it certainly can replace the stuff they don't like to do, which is the back-end administrative work of sending out an invoice, following up on an email, following up on a sales call, because they still got to sell paintings, Right. And so it can actually solve some of the administrative side that they don't want to do.
Yeah. I love that thought of like those two streams and the live, real, tangible. There's an opportunity in the church. Mm-hmm. I mean, to leverage all of that stuff, but then the engagement and the experience of like, we are embodied people. The resurrection was bodily. We believe in those things, and there's community, and all of that won't be replaced. And we shouldn't be threatened by it. We actually have an opportunity to shape that lane of what people want. And
this isn't new, right? I mean, if you look at it's new in its scale and the impact it's going to create. But let's just look at like online sermons, for example, or live streams of services. The church as a whole has argued over this for many years now, over whether it's appropriate or not appropriate, whether it is church or isn't church. And I'm not here to answer that question today. But what I am here to say is that it is a mistake to not use the resources that we have to distribute the gospel at the highest possible rate we can. Right. Now, once COVID came along, everybody was forced into live streaming. They were forced into recording messages and sermons and sending them out. And if they had just done that ahead of time, they'd have been more prepared. And so I see most of these things, I mean, to me, it's like the 5 talents, I mean, the master gave one guy 5 talents, 1 4, 1 1, and one buried it in the sand because he was scared. And I'm like, I want to stand before God and him go, well done, good and faithful servant. Now, he's going to do that because of the covered blood of Jesus Christ, not because of any of the things I've done. Like I get the thing, but I'm still saying, like, I want to know that whatever I have been given, that I look at that thing and I evaluate it and I go, can I use this for good and ultimately the glory of God? Yeah. And if I can, I should.
Yeah. So, okay, let's shift a little bit. Like, what are some ways that church planters can benefit from AI?
Great question. So here's a really interesting thing about even using something like the free version of ChatGPT is a lot of people struggle with it a little bit because it's such a different way of thinking than how we have thought before, especially with interacting with a computer. And so one of the things I always tell people is we have this problem, I call it the blank slate problem, which is I open it up and there's just a blank box. I don't know what to put in it. So one of the best things that a church planter could do is to go, hey, I'm a church planter in fill in the blank. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's the people that I'm trying to reach. How could you help me? And ask it. And people are like, ask the robot how it can help. Yeah, ask the robot how it can help you. And you'll be surprised. Here's some things that I possibly could help you with. And you might go, I don't want you to do that. But 3 and 4 sound really helpful. Tell me more about number 3. And so you have to think of it as a conversation. An easy way to think of this for people to get their mind wrapped around it is, back in the day, there was a show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Regis Philbin was the host, and you'd have this thing called Phone a Friend. And if you had a question about a thing that you didn't know the answer to, you would phone your friend. Yeah. Now, what is different about this than, say, Google, because people are like, I already have this, I've got Google, I can go ask it any question, is that Google will just return a list of hundreds or thousands of websites. This you can actually have an ongoing conversation with. And so literally going, hey, how can you help me? And letting it literally act as an assistant. I love how the kids in my co-op class at the beginning of the year said it. They would say things like, and I had not taught them this, they just kind of came up with it. They said, we partnered with the AI to accomplish X, Y, and Z in the same way that you would many other things. And so the disadvantage of not having a big budget and not having a big team is you don't have a big budget, you don't have a big team. But the beauty of AI in that context is it can actually help accomplish many of the things that you might have not otherwise had time to do.
Sure. So, I mean, you were talking about things like social media clips.
Sure.
Or, I mean, accounting or, whatever. I mean,
help me understand this thing that I just got.
Yeah. Yeah. Load my budget in budget versus actuals and then analyze it and show me where.
Yeah, you can copy and paste I would do a paid account for this because you have a $20 a month paid account. It's more secure than the free version. Just FYI, it's good to know. It's the best $20 a month you could pay anyway. And you can copy data in there and go, hey, tell me about X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Help me understand this. Teach me this thing, because if I'm a church planner, I might not understand the cash flow statement very well,
Right.
And that maybe they didn't teach you that deeply in seminary as you needed it to be taught to you.
At all.
But yet you can go in there. And then here's a little trick that's so easy. Let's say it explains it. And you're like, I still have no idea what it's talking about. Can you explain to me like I'm an 8th grader? Actually, can you do 5th grade?
Yeah, that's right.
Whatever that is, and it will keep changing its analogies, its structure, and how it teaches you. And this, I don't have time for this today, but education is a whole incredible opportunity for how we can teach kids in the future, because the number one thing that affects educational outcomes is one-on-one tutoring. And AI can actually be that one-on-one tutoring when we couldn't have enough people to pull that off. So same thing when we're trying to learn something, it can be that conversational agent to help.
Yep. So how about in terms of sermon planning, sermon prep, small group prep, that type of thing? Like, how can it be a benefit? And then second maybe is like, where do we start crossing the line?
Yeah. I think everybody's going to have probably their own feeling of where the line gets crossed. For me personally, it would be telling it to write a sermon transcript for me and then delivering that transcript.
For sure. Yeah.
I've also seen people take other people's sermons and read them verbatim on stage. I mean, I don't think that's a great idea, but that's also not my job to judge them, so they can figure it out.
I completely agree.
So that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think there's a line there, but because I also, that's a whole nother podcast probably. But as for me, I just think about even before I had ChatGPT, when I would get to prepare a sermon, I'd be really careful because my instinct often for a season was to read what everybody else had to say about the Bible instead of just reading the Bible. And so I would intentionally spend hours and hours and hours just with the Word alone and a piece of paper. No internet, no computer, because my instinct is to go, well, what did John Piper say about this? And what did Tim Keller think about it? And what is and
you start doing your own confirmation bias
100%,
on a thing.
100%. And so I would do the same thing now. I would start with a piece of paper and I'd start with the Word and I would go, what does the Bible say? Let me just read it and let me just let it interpret itself for a while. Let me come up with a good outline. I kind of feel where the Lord's, leading in this situation. Then I'm going to use, for me, I would go to ChatGPT and I would use it as my research assistant. I would set up a project, not to get too technical, but I'd set up a project inside ChatGPT and I would give it some instructions. So I would say, hey, I'm a pastor at fill in the blank from this denomination, fill in the blank. And we generally, I can even upload an example of my past couple of sermons to kind of give it a structure of like things we think and believe. I probably would outline like some boundaries of theologically, here's the types of people that I align with, And then I would start using it as a research assistant. Hey, give me some ideas around this. I've got this one idea, but are there some other stories out there like that? Can you find me a quote on, in the same way that a professor would go to a TA and ask for them to do some research and bring some information back.
So in that researching, that example, how is that? I mean, I keep pointing at the library, and I know AI is fundamentally different than a library, but is it really morally any different?
I don't think so.
That, I mean, asking it to go find quotes from Spurgeon than me pulling Spurgeon off the shelf and finding the quote.
I think fundamentally there can be a difference for a person, because I mean you and I have probably experienced the exact same thing. When there's something about opening a book and digging into it, and sometimes you end up on something that actually was not what you and it's actually better, you know. So there's a little bit of that, that is lost. And so I'm not suggesting we get rid of books. It's just it's another tool in the arsenal, just like going to Logos or going to some other commentary or going to anything else.
Which Logos is now using.
For sure.
I mean, it's, all of it's searching and everything is.
And the nice thing about something like that, an embedded AI, they're using something like Claude or OpenAI's ChatGPT or something else behind the scenes. They all are. They've just constructed a framework and guardrails automatically.
Yeah.
So there's some value to that, because they've kind of already pre-structured some of it for you to help keep you out of trouble.
Stay in our box.
Yeah.
And then leverage your thing for
and
our
also
box.
Like inside of ChatGPT, for example, you can ask it, hey, I want you to search the web and I want you to cite your sources. So it can then show you specific web pages where it pulled things from, so you can go validate that stuff and make sure that what you're saying is actually true.
So one of the things we've been kind of circling around, and the word's been used a couple times, is discern. And I think that's one of as I think about this, and I mean, I've done lots of work around discernment. That's kind of my project. That's what I did doctoral work on and writing on and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's interesting, like it can't discern. Discernment is an engagement between God and one of his children. And so, it can research, it can send you quotes, but then there is a level of like, okay, Lord, do you want me to use this with your people in this place, in this time, in this thing? And it can't do that.
It can't.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, as I'm working on this book that I'm writing, it doesn't have the lived experience that I have. It doesn't have the personal stories. It could make up some stories, which some people do anyway. But it doesn't.
Don't do that, by the way.
Do not do that. But it's not going to be the same.
Right.
You know, I think people are still going to want to hear from people and their actual lived experience. It doesn't have that.
Right.
But even on the discernment side, it's interesting because there's a difference in what you're talking about where I'm about to go. But like when we're building applications and websites and even creating art and design, there's also a level of different kind of discernment, but it's also a level of discernment where I keep telling creatives, you have an incredible value because somebody's got to be able to look at the thing and go, somebody might say that I'm not sure it looks good, but they might not know what to tell it to make it look better. Right. Other than just saying make it look better, which sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't.
So, but I think that's important because I think maybe sometimes people's like stiff arming of this is feeling like, well, if you embrace AI, then what you're embracing is this idea that it can do the discerning for you. You know, it can, and those two don't have to, like, you don't have to agree to one for the other. Yeah. You can say, I can use this and I'm still obligated and still get the privilege to go to the Lord with this. Right. And do that.
Yeah. In the same way that you would find any other research material. And I think, especially if I was a solo pastor with no staff at a new church plant, I've only got so many hours in the week. Yeah. I've only got so many days in the month. And so I need to be as efficient with my time as I can. And what that means is I can then do what only people can do, which is sit face to face, shoulder to shoulder with other human beings and disciple and to bear burdens and to pray with each other. And so what this actually allows is to expedite some of the research side and also to help clean up some of the stuff. So I'm mildly dyslexic. One of my sons is pretty significantly dyslexic. Well, what that means is that if I write stuff down, there's going to be a lot of errors in it. I'm never going to be great at spelling and grammar and all these things, but it fixes all that for me. All that is now solved. It's as if I had an editor, which I would have to pay in any other scenario because I need it, you know? Yeah. And so it can solve those things for me, take away those frustrations, but the work product is still what I've put together. Right.
And I think that's also, you know, that was the other thing, the discernment, but then all of the one anotherings that are in Scripture, like it can't do that. No. It can't actually bear your burdens. It can't actually care for you. Like it may be able to kick back information, again, research that says if you're in this situation, you should try doing these things. But that's fundamentally different than care or burden bearing or,
Right.
helping.
It can give you fake empathy. It can't give you real empathy.
Right.
And there's a difference.
Right.
Right. We know this with human beings, though. Like, you can tell when somebody's like, they're acting like they're empathetic, but they're not really.
Right.
And so
I was having a conversation today with somebody, and they were saying they were talking to their pastor, and they felt like the pastor was just talking at them, not talking with them.
Sure.
And they were like pouring out there, and they were just kind of getting these little pat answers. And it's like that. It's like the human wasn't actually humaning.
But the church, the other thing in the context I was thinking about that is like how it relates to people. One of the biggest hurdles that the church needs to pay attention to, of all sizes, whether you got 3 people come into a living room or tens of thousands of people, is the impact that it will have on children. And I'm very pro teaching children how to use AI. I just said I just taught an entire class. That said, I would be careful about when I implement it, and I'd be paying attention to what they're doing. Because especially what's going to happen is, this is going to happen with adults too, and nobody's paying attention to it, is AI companionship is going to be a real problem, especially with young children. People are lonelier than ever, and all of a sudden they're going to have a human-like voice who knows perfectly how to fake empathize with them, hear them, listen, tell them they understand how hard it is, and they'll do it 24/7. And they'll never upset them, and they'll never step on their toes. And the danger of that for young children and adults is very high, and I'll be willing to bet that the vast majority of pastors in the world aren't even thinking about it.
Well, as you're saying that, I think as a form of idolatry.
Oh, for sure.
Because you've now created this thing that will give you what only the Lord can give you.
Yeah.
And you're settling for a lesser version of that thing, and it's just giving you what you want. Like you said, like the confirmation bias in it is like, so on multiple levels.
Yeah, and I'm as pro AI as just about anybody could be. That said, we also potentially have a real Tower of Babel situation on our hands. I mean, because here's the thing: AI is not there yet, but give it another 3 to 5 years at most,
right?
And it will feel like, it already feels like, it's all knowing. And then once it has access to all kinds of different tools and resources and programs, it will feel like it is all powerful. And so how far do you have to go to get to a point where maybe not a strong believer, but somebody who's not a believer would go, it's kind of like a God.
Right.
And so those are things we got to pay attention to,
right.
So I'm not ignorant or blind to the potential pitfalls. I'm just saying I want to use it for good, and I want to pay attention to the things that are going to be real problems for culture, and churches need to know about it, and pastors need to know about it.
Okay, to set this up, you use Howie.ai.
Yeah.
I use Howie.ai. And to literally schedule, because we had conversations, like text messages, like, hey, we should get together. And it stretched on for like 6 weeks. And finally, I just emailed Howie to your Howie and said, Adam's Howie, get with Jay's Howie and figure this out. And we kind of laughed because we're like, how long can we break Howie?
Yeah.
Can we mind bend Howie?
Yeah, so for me, it's not for me what we're talking about. There's an AI scheduling assistant. It's Howie.ai, and it's basically just a tool where you can email it as you would your regular assistant.
Yep. And
it's like $20-something a month. But I'd never done it where both people had the same service.
Yeah.
And so I intentionally tried to confuse it by changing my email address, telling it to talk to Adam's AI assistant, and it perfectly scheduled our time together.
It did it. It did what you and I texted and talked about for 6 weeks.
I know. It's wild.
And did it. But all that just to say, what are some tools?
Yeah.
Like if you were going to use this properly in the context of ministry, what are some good tools that a planter would find benefit from?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm kind of a tool junkie right now. I don't know if you use the word junkie on a church podcast, but here we are. And it is incredible how many tools are out there. So finding the right one's really important.
Right.
I would tell everybody, just if you don't feel like you're kind of mastered something like ChatGPT, start there.
Yeah.
Because there's some basic tools built in to that tool
Right.
that most people aren't aware of. For example, a lot of people don't realize you can go in there and set up a project. It looks just like a folder, but it's more than a folder. And the reason it's more than a folder is you can give it custom instructions and custom files. So by giving it custom files, going back to its library, you're expanding its library as a reference source. So for example, in this new book that I'm writing, I gave it a manuscript of my last book and said, I want you to use this to understand my tone and style. So when it's rewriting a paragraph that I've given it specific instructions for, just like I would an editor, by the way, it knows how to write in my tone and style because I've given it a resource that perfectly matches that. Now, if you're super mega famous, you probably don't need to do that, but I'm not super mega famous, so I needed to give it some resources. And then you can give it instructions of what you want it to do inside of that project. So tool number one is get good at using the $20 a month ChatGPT, and for most people, that's going to be better than anything they could possibly do.
And then, and you said this already, but just to kind of double down on it, is learn the prompting.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feels like, okay, great, you have ChatGPT. You gotta learn how to tell it what to do and where to go. It's the huge part of that.
Yeah,
thing.
for sure. And you can ask it, hey, teach me how to prompt better, and it will teach you. Like that's what's so crazy. But think about this in the context of, I know plenty of people who aren't really good at Googling. Most of us probably know somebody like this. And they're like, well, I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find it. And then you do one search and you find it. Why?
Right.
Because a Google search is kind of like a prompt. You know how to tell it what to look for.
Right.
And the more specific you are, the better the outcome's going to be. So it's always good to know garbage in, garbage out. There are also some really good church-specific tools out there that I've found that we've kind of played with. One is church.tech. I know the guys over there that run that. And basically what that allows you to do is upload a sermon, for example, and it'll automatically clip up the sermon into multiple clips. It'll help pull out quotes from it, just as if you had an assistant sitting in the room going, hey, what is a quote that they said that might resonate with people, and then we need to put online.
Yeah. I mean, 2 years ago, I remember people sitting in, we'd have somebody in the worship service literally like taking notes to go, ooh, say that.
For sure.
Go.
Or even like to categorize a sermon in post, as most churches don't have time to do that. It's like, and same thing, we have a sheet that has maybe 100 different categories in it. Somebody would sit and go, okay, that was about marriage. Okay, that was about friendship. Okay, that was about salvation. That was about, justification, whatever. And now the AI can do all of that work for us. And so that tool, church.tech, can be really helpful in creating some draft other materials. So one of the things, if I was a small church that I might not have time to do, is create ancillary resources off of a sermon. So for example, follow-up questions, disciple small group questions, or things for people to resource. And this is where some people start to get a little like, but I'm like, look, it's just using the sermon transcript as its base, and then it's producing an 80% product, which is what you would hand to an assistant to do or another team member, and then you're going to read through it and you're going to adjust it based on your own discernment and what you know.
Don't stick it in and then mail it off.
No, I would never suggest that.
Don't outsource it.
We're not there yet. And so those two tools alone, just getting better at ChatGPT and something like church.tech, have incredible ramifications.
Yeah.
And you're talking about maybe $40 a month, 50, I don't know what, between the two of them. Like it's less than $100 a month, significantly less than you'd have to pay somebody else to do it.
Oh yeah.
And it's incredible what it can do.
Yeah.
Or the Howie scheduling.
Yeah, I mean,
we use is incredible.
Yeah. For $20 a month.
How much time do you spend going back and forth trying to get somebody's date and time? We did it for weeks. Well, it can just solve it for you.
Right. So. Yeah. Do you have some other tools? A major expense to guys that are planting early on is like building out a website and graphic design and things like that.
Or even creating slide decks or documents. There's another great tool that I really love called Gamma. I think it's gamma.app is the address. We can put all the links in the show notes. But and what it will do is you can give it an outline and pick a theme or style, and it'll build out a full slide deck for you. So it can build out basically a PowerPoint presentation, and it'll even either source the images for you, automatically render the images or illustrations for you that are totally custom, or you can upload your own, but it will actually design the entire deck for you. It can do the same thing with like a document that you need to send out.
Yeah, like if you needed a prospectus or something like that.
It'll dress it up a lot more if you don't have a designer to do it for you. And that can be super helpful in the process. A lot of people these days are using Canva for basic design stuff. It can be a really great resource. And inside of Canva, they now have all kinds of AI tools where you can just give it some instruction. And there's a couple of things I tell people to pay attention to as they're thinking about this is sometimes people go, well, I tried that and it wasn't very good. And I'm like, well, when did you try it? And they go, well, it's probably 6 months ago. And I'm like, well, try again. Because that's one thing people don't realize is I've tried things that 6 months ago were not good, and now they're exceptional. We're moving faster than dog years here. Things that used to be year-long product cycles are 30-day product cycles at the longest.
Wow. Yeah. How about web design?
Yeah.
I mean, are there tools out there that
there are? I would say that
guys can use, or are we not there yet?
No, we are. But I would say that they still are helpful to have some level of experience or discernment again of what the outcome is. But one of the ones I really love that's really easy, it's called lovable.dev. So instead of .com, it's .dev. And you can just go in there and say, hey, I'm trying to build a website for, fill in the name of the church. Here's some things that matter to me. And just plain language describe as much as you can.
Yeah.
Hit create, and it's going to build out a draft. And then you're just going to give feedback to it just like you would give feedback to a web development company. In fact, our team at the marketing agency that I run, historically over the last, we've been around for 26 years, over the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, we've built most things in WordPress. Well, we're at a place now where we're using some other AI tools that are a little bit more advanced on the development side. It allows us to do all kind of stuff, but we're building out. I told my team, I was like, by the end of the year, I don't want to build WordPress anymore. I'm going to build everything in AI because it allows us to create things we couldn't have otherwise done. An example, here at 1122, we're starting to develop a lot of campuses. And sometimes if you just get a drop-down list, it's like, well, which one should I go to? Well, in 2 prompts, I built a tool that you can type in your zip code, and it will show you the campus, show you what service times are at, show you a map, and take you there. And even creating resources for sermons, something like lovable.dev can do that as well. So maybe you've got an assessment you want people to take. I just rebuilt, it's not public yet, but I just rebuilt how our serve kind of onboarding happens. Because right now on the website, it's just this huge long list of things you got to click on, you get a different form, and it's just a lot going on.
Sure.
And so I just said, hey, I want to build a super simple form, and I want people to just select, do you want to serve during service or during the week? Okay, here's the opportunities during the week, but clean, super simple. And so the more clear I can be with what I want, the better outcome. That's why I said the discernment matters, because I have built websites since I was 12, so it's easier for me to give it the right feedback.
Yeah.
That said, it can also be a really great prototyping start, even if it doesn't end up.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Is like, hey, this is good enough for
80%.
this phase of the plant.
That's right.
So it'll get me until I can go hire business
100%.
builders, and then they'll get me the the rest of the way.
And for most small organizations, small churches, it'll get you there.
Yeah.
And we were not there 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And now we are.
So last question, we'll kind of wrap this up.
One more tool, actually, while I'm thinking about it. Another really cool tool, let's say you want to create like a logo for your church, or you want to create some graphics that actually use particular images of areas or even people. There's a tool called Ideogram. I don't know exactly how to spell that, but it's called Ideogram, and you can just look it up, and we'll put a link in the show notes. And I literally just created a draft copy of the cover of the book that I'm working on. Now I'm still going to give it to designer. They'll clean it up, but it got me like 90% there. And so it's a great way to ideate, because sometimes we kind of think we know what we want. I mean, we deal with clients all the time, and they have a hard time describing it. But if you can kind of softly describe it, go, not like that, more like this, and it'll just keep iterating for you. But instead of waiting days or weeks to see a new version, you're waiting seconds.
Right. So, okay, go back to putting your agency hat back on for a minute. How would somebody who traditionally, like a pastor, a planter, would come to you and say, hey, I want to do this. I want to build this project or whatever. And how would I know when is the right time to come to you? And when like this is good enough or not? Or
there's always a couple layers of where to take action. So most of the time what people do is it's usually based on budget, and they'll start with somebody who's a kid down the street, but I used to be that kid down the street. So I'm into that. Like, praise God, you know, that somebody trusted me when I was 13 years old to build them a website. And then eventually you just realize, hey, we've kind of outgrown the capacity of this, and we need to go to a contractor. Now maybe we need to hire a team member. Now maybe we need a full agency. But one of the things that we're doing at the agency, because I'm fully aware that AI could basically do everything that we do in the next handful of years, is we're starting to build a lot of community. And so I believe that the future is in 3 specific buckets, which it kind of always has been. Do it yourself, do it with you, do it for you.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're starting to think about things. So we're building right now a digital community of leaders of all business, ministry, nonprofit, etc., where we're going to give away a ton of resources because that's just on my heart and I can do it. So we're going to give away a bunch of stuff. And then we are going to, from there, build communities where people can have access to classes and tools and training. And then there'll be another layer where they can have access to the team that's not going to do it for them, but they'll kind of talk them through it.
Yeah.
And then the top layer is the existing agency, which is just tell us what you want, we'll do it for you.
Yeah.
You know? And so if people want access, some early access to that and a list of all of my favorite tools, I've got a website. It's aiwithj.com.
Yep.
They can go there. That's totally free. Put your email address in. You'll get a list of my favorite tools currently. And as soon as that community launches, we'll give you an invite. There'll be a free version with tons of access, and then there'll be a paid version with higher access. So aiwithj.com, people can get all those resources.
Yeah. Well, Jay, thanks so much for jumping in here with us and talking about this. And I think it is such an important conversation.
It is.
In so many of those facets, and I feel like we just skimmed the surface of this thing. And so I feel like you saying it's a 30-day cycle. I feel like we'll need to be back here in 6 months and have a whole other conversation about this thing again.
It'll totally change by then, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, man.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Acts 29 podcast. If you want to connect with Acts 29 or find out more about planting a church with Acts 29, you can go to acts29.com. Go ahead and hit like on the podcast and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us.